Are we recording it? Oh, we are recording. Perfect. I've fucked up so many times. We're in beer number 2. Okay, let's get things rolling.
This station is conducting a test of the emergency broadcast. This is only a test.
Internet, what is up? We are back for video number 2. One of my favorite IPAs from Melvin, Juice Theorem. You guys should check it out. It's one of their good ones, 7%, and really a really great beer. So what are we going to talk about right now? We're going to talk about my career, because as we continue to proliferate the page, I'm going to set the stage for kind of my origins and where I came from. So grew up in Wyoming on a ranch, small little tiny ranch, had every animal known to mankind, got real tired of that, wasn't my jam, and became a punk rocker and rode a skateboard and dyed my hair and got tattoos and did all the things and really horrified my super conservative parents. They hated it. And then I became really interested in the military after I realized that a career in snowboarding was not going to happen. 1, because I probably wasn't good enough, and 2, because it was really expensive to do all the things that I needed to do to go down that route, and we didn't have a lot of money growing up, so I wasn't able to pursue that, and I was depressed about it for a while. And then my friend handed me a book called Rogue Warrior, and by the late great plank holder and founding commander of SEAL Team 6, Dick Marcinko. I read that book and I was immediately enthralled in everything SEAL, everything Commando, everything Special Forces. So originally wanted to be a SEAL. So glad I dodged that bullet. Going down the road, they lost my paperwork. Things didn't work out. I ended up joining the men's department of the Navy, which is the United States Marine Corps. I'm so happy I did that. And proceeded to have a career there for almost a decade, nearly a decade. Did a bunch of deployments to Iraq, did a bunch of consulting, and that's kind of where, at the tail end of my military career and getting into the industry, what we call the industry, it started taking shape. I started out at Special Operations Equipment, owned by John Willis. He used to have a shop in Oceanside. He shared this little shop downtown on the beach with a little company at the time called Strider Knives. Mick Strider and Dwayne Dwyer, great dudes, phenomenal guys. They have since split, and both of them still make phenomenal knives, and I have several of them and love their blades. They were in the back. And so I got to meet them, and in meeting them and working with John Willis at Special Operations Equipment as a young Lance Corporal, I was able to meet Barry Duke at Surefire. And Barry, if you're watching this, man, love you. I hope you and Michelle are well. And I got to know the intimate parts of the Surefire Institute. And Barry introduced me to Dave Maynard, who was one of the founders of the Surefire Institute. And so I was able to get to know Dave really well. We became amazingly close friends. Dave went on to become a contractor and work for GRS. And he did, I think, like 23 deployments with GRS. That guy basically formed my off-duty education and really started to shape my interest in, 1, gear and product development, but 2, the aspects of looking outside the box for higher levels of training. And I really owe a lot to Dave Maynard in terms of my education in CQB, my education in Lowlight. He was one of the founding members of the Surefire Institute with Ken Good, and he wrote the doctrine essentially for Lowlight. And so I went on for a period of time working with Dave and consulting with him even after I got off active duty. I did a lot of consulting with Surefire, which leads us to this guy right here. This was probably my most notable project that I've ever worked on to date, which was the Vampire technology. So I'm going to tell the story of how Vampire technology came to life. And what had happened was I was doing a class with Dave, and we were training a bunch of SEALs from Warcom. And in that group of SEALs from Warcom, there was some former dev group guys, and they had experience in combat, and they went through the low light course that Dave and I do, and they said, this training is awesome, we love it. However, we've decided that our new SOP is to just go strictly IR. We're not going to put white lights on guns anymore. And so I took that information back to Surefire, and they were a little horrified. They were like, oh man, this is not great. Particularly John Matthews. He is the owner of Surefire. Brilliant man, great engineer. Surefire is a great company. They can't really get the fuck out of their own way when it comes to design these days, but back in the day, they were really good. And John, the rest of the crew that was there, they were all very horrified because Naval Special Warfare at the time was spending a lot of money with Surefire. So they didn't know what to do. They were like, what should we do? What should we do? And I was a spry 25-year-old. No, I take that back. At the time, I was like 27 years old. And I was sitting in the room and had been off active duty for a second. And I just looked around and I was like, why don't we make an IR weapon light? Better yet, why don't we make a light that does IR and white light? And you would have thought that I had a dick growing out of my forehead the way everybody looked at me in the room. And then they decided they liked that. And so John invited me to come to a meeting, and I did. And we sat down. And anybody that knows John intimately and knows how he does product development, I'm not going to get into that because there will be people inevitably at Surefire that'll be like, this story is bullshit. He didn't do this. He didn't do that. I did. And fuck those people. So I talked to John intimately about, what we were doing in CQB, what I thought was possible. And at the time, if you look behind me, there's my old school build right there. The PEC 2 was not great at the time. The PEC 2 had a lot of issues with it. And so it was very dirty, had a lot of dirty flood going on. There just wasn't a clean IR beam out there. So I suggested to John, because it was at the time when Surefire was switching from incandescent bulbs to IR, LEDs in general. And we were already making a light called the aviator light. And what the aviator light was originally designed to do was a multispectral light. It could do red or white. And it was a two-stage switch, so you'd push it down halfway. I wish I had one. I don't have one. I have got a shit ton of other lights up there on the shelf, but I don't have an aviator, which I kind of kick myself for. I actually kick myself that I don't have the original prototype that Paul Kim, who was the vice president of engineering at Surefire at the time, built specifically for me. But he built an aviator for me, a 6-volt light that had IR LEDs and then a Surefire incandescent. It was had like a P60 bulb in it. And I went and put that on a ring mount on my gun, and I went and tested the efficacy of having a IR capability and a white light combined together, and it was amazing. And I was able to kind of formulate and come up with my own TTPs, hybrid TTPs for operating in a CQB close range environment with white light and with IR. And so I came back, I gave a big report to John Matthews. I'm like, hey, this is what is happening right now. This is how effective these techniques are. This is how effective this piece of gear is. And he was like, great, let's move forward on it. And so I worked with his engineering team, and we began to work on things. And they came up with this guy, which is kind of an antique. It's still out there. They're still being bought. I still see them on rifles from time to time. This is called the the M720V. And it's also called the CQB light. Now, here's what I didn't care for. They shoved way too much capability into this light. Like, it's got this button right here is a handheld. You can take it off the gun and you can push the button. It's low lumens, so handheld. It's got a rotating bezel on it so that it goes from white to IR to off. So you can't have an AD with your light. And then on both the white, so you'll see on this side, it's got right here, these are low, medium, and high settings for the white light. And then if you flip it over, it's got low, medium, and high settings for IR. And then it's also got this big, ugly, bulky, shitty throw lever that Tim LaFrance designed that's a piece of shit. And nobody's ever liked this thing. It never really took off or worked that well. And then it's got this plug where you can plug in a switch. So I unfortunately had to leave in the middle of the product development, or not in the middle of the product, towards the tail end of like getting a first version of this out, and I had to go to Afghanistan and deploy. So I did, and I came back, and by the time I got back, I think it was like 6 months later on that particular rotation, they had already got this working prototype, and I got this slapped in my hand, and they were like, this is what it's gonna be, and the tooling was already done, and the engineering was already done, and the prototype, the pre-production prototype was already done, and I knew immediately that it was a turd and it had a shit ton of failures that were not gonna be great. But nonetheless, it was the first time ever that IR and white light were combined into one unit. So that's the story of the Vampire. And it was essentially my concept, and I participated heavily in the development. And it's one of the things that I'm kind of the most proud of and known for. So moving down the line, I continued to consult heavily with other companies in the industry, Magpul, 511, Audi Gear, Daniel Defense, a bunch of different companies. And now, Smith Optics. Smith Optics is one. Here's these are called the Pivlocks. These are the V2 tactical Pivlocks. I worked for Smith for 3 years, and I'm really proud of these. I worked on the team that was responsible for developing these eyewear, and at the time, this was the first set of frameless eyewear that was able to pass the PEL, or APEL, Army approved eyewear list is what I think that stands for, that acronym. But it was the first set of mil-spec eyewear that was frameless. So there's that guy. I worked on that project. So design, I love training, and those are the two things that I pursued. Those are my two passions. And one of the most fun projects that I ever got to work on was with 511 Tactical. Back, I think it was in 2016, I got to work on a project with 511 Tactical and Ubisoft to help develop the Ghost Recon Wildlands video game. And I am, yes, a character in that video game, which most people, it's not widely known that I am in fact, the character Nomad, who is the team leader, is based on me and my career in contracting in the military. So hopefully you guys will catch that on the next episode. We're going to release some awesome highlights of that. I actually worked on a production with Rooster Teeth, who is a very widely known, amazing YouTube. They're like the OG gang. They're one of the OG gangsters in the YouTube game. And I was lucky enough to work on that project with them. And we did a really cool, like, behind the scenes prank video with them. We pranked one of their directors and producers, and it was great. And then I got to work on the video game itself, and it was one of the highlights of my career. So you guys can check that out in the next YouTube video. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening to my rant and me talk about myself, which I hate fucking doing. But stick with us. We're going to continue to do awesome things. Do all the things. Comment, like, subscribe, share, click all the buttons, all the things, do all the things. And we will catch you next time. Peace.